What is up, you guys? Glitches here, and welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to bring you my G17 Hazardous Object Build for Once Human. It's one of the 3 new unique weapons that dropped with the Lunar Oracle update. It is an unstable bomber themed weapon. It's actually a pistol, and it's surprisingly a lot better than I was anticipating. It's probably, in my opinion, the weakest of the 3 new ones. I do plan on making builds for all of the other ones, including some older ones that got revamped after the patch, so keep an eye out for that. But I have been having some fun with this, and I think I've come up with a pretty decent build for it. So without any further ado, let's jump right into the weapons. So if we go to our menu here, the way the hazardous object works is hitting enemies grants a 20% chance to trigger the unstable bomber effect. And for those of you that don't know the details of unstable bomber, you trigger 1 status damage blast of 100% your psi intensity after a 0.1 second delay with a blast radius of 1.5 meters. The damage decays over the explosion distance down to a minimum of 50%, and the additional damage is blast element. It cannot crit, cannot strike weak spots, and will not decay with distance. Now, what's cool with this particular weapon is if we continue reading, the reload time is reduced by 40%, and the reload action is completely replaced by throwing your weapon, consuming all ammo to deal blast damage to targets within a 3-meter range equal to 50% plus the consumed ammo times 18% psi intensity, capping at 450%. Now, the effect benefits from unstable bomber's damage and range bonus, so this is an important one, and deals 50% damage to yourself. That part I think is actually bugged right now. I haven't seen it do any damage to myself or the player, so I don't know if that's just a similar translation issue, similar to the critical pulse, where it's saying 50% damage to players, meaning for PvP. That could be the case for this. But moving on, throwing the weapon will grant 75% chance to recover 75% of the ammo consumed, and a 25% chance to recover 25% of the ammo consumed. Then, as some icing on the cake, the unstable bomber damage and range is increased by 10% for 10 seconds each time unstable bomber deals damage, and that can stack up to 50%, which is pretty nice. So right out the gate, the key things that we want to focus on here is that the damage of this particular weapon, when we're doing the throw ability, does scale with unique unstable bomber damage modifiers and unstable bomber range. So on your mask and ideally on the weapon itself, you would ideally have unstable bomber suffixes to have things like increased blast damage, increased blast radius, because that can get up to 20%, and increase unstable bomber damage. Unfortunately, I don't have the best ones. I have a few unstable bomber ones on my mask, but I only have status and elemental on my helmet, which we'll go over here, or on the weapon, which we'll go over here in a minute. So that could be a little bit better. But the rest of the gear, you're going to want to focus on elemental and status damage. So as for the mod, we're going to run supercharged talents, ideally triggering unstable bomber, well, not talents, unstable bomber ideally. You would ideally want unstable bomber damage, blast damage, and unstable bomber radius on this to get the maximum benefit. If you don't have those, the next best thing would be elemental damage, status damage, potentially magazine capacity, and then obviously damage to great ones. And the supercharged mod that we're going to be using, I'm using talents, but what it does is triggering unstable bomber grants unstable bomber damage plus 5% for 3 seconds, and the effect can stack up to 6 times. And because we're going to be chucking our gun constantly, which triggers unstable bomber, you can build those stacks really, really fast. So it's a really good mod to take advantage of that. I did try like the older crit-based ones, but a full lone wolf set with just how the mechanics of this weapon worked, doing a crit-based build didn't do anywhere near as much damage as a full elemental and unstable bomber-based build. So I switched back to the elemental, and that's the kind of gear that we're going to be revolving around, and mods for this particular build moving forward. So supercharged for the mod. Quickly for the cosmetics, I'm using multi-break, light reflex sight, integrated laser sight, and the extended pistol mag. For the demo, I'll be running tungsten pistol bullets. I forgot to mention actually on the hazardous object, the calibration, which is really important. The calibration you want to run on here, ideally best in slot, is going to be the rapid shot style with double elemental. It's really the only one that I would recommend for this gun. It gives plus 25% increased fire rate, which is amazing on this because the faster we can burn through our mag, the faster we can build up those initial unstable bomber stacks to give our throw reload animation more damage. It also gives increased magazine capacity at the cost of 15% attack, which isn't a big deal because the majority of our damage is going to be coming from the throwable action, not actually firing. And then obviously double elemental is going to be increased damage for blast across the board. I've got mine calibrated to 9, so when we do the damage test, keep in mind that 10% additional elemental damage is not going to be calculated in right now because I don't have this max. So there's a bunch of things that I can min-max in this build to make it even better. I have far from perfect mods on this build, but it still does pretty decent damage. So that is the mod you want on the primary weapon. Then moving on to the secondary weapon, I like to run either the Wildfire or the Bingo Sniper Rifle. Personally, I like to run the Wildfire. You can spread marks a little bit more quickly, and it's the same ammunition type as the Hazardous Object, so you don't have to craft multiple types of ammo. Not that it's that big of a deal, but the way Wildfire works is there's a 60% chance to trigger the bullseye, and for those of you who don't know what bullseye is, it basically marks the target, outlining them in a blue outline, and it adds the vulnerability status effect to them, which causes them to take 8% more damage. This can also have a chance to spread at 80% chance to one additional enemy within 15 meters, and then we will combo this with the vulnerability amplifier mod to increase that vulnerability effect that bullseye does by another 8%. So now every marked enemy that you hit will now take plus 16% damage instead of plus 8. So that's good mod there. The substats on this weapon, not a big deal because we're really just going to be using this for marking targets. So keep that in mind. And then for the accessories on this one, not as important, but I run the tactical flash hider, complex reflex sight, integrated laser sight, and the gold extended pistol mag. And then the mod calibration for the Wildfire. I don't have anything on it right now, but ideally on all my secondary weapons, I try to run portable mods calibrations because of the increased swap speed. The suffixes or substats rather on the secondary weapons aren't as important because again, we're only using it to mark targets. So that is the calibration for that. Moving on to the long axe. This is what I use for my melee weapon, primarily because it's the only weapon that can cast Fortress Warfare for a little bit of additional damage. For those of you that don't know what Fortress Warfare is, when you do a successful heavy swing, a full swing, you basically create an aura on the ground that gives you and all of your allies standing within the ring a buff that is called Super Armor, and anyone that has Super Armor for 5 seconds will be given, I believe it's 20% bonus weapon damage. We can actually check this here if we just click it and go to Fortress Warfare. Yep, weapon damage plus 20%. And then we will combo this with the portable territory mod, which will extend that Fortress Warfare buff duration for an additional 2 seconds after it ends. So that just gives us a little bit of a behind the scenes bonus damage using this melee weapon. Honestly, I don't really use it that often because the combo is like really annoying to pull off. If you're going against a boss, you might be able to get away with it, but when you're just running around, honestly, just throwing your weapon will pretty much one-shot anything. You almost never have to worry about melee damage. It's pretty much just for when you're setting up big combos against slower targets and bosses and things like that. So that is the melee weapon, all of the calibrations and things like that. Moving on to the armor, we are going to be running the Blackstone set, 4-piece Blackstone. We are also going to be running 1-piece Lone Wolf for the increased magazine capacity with the 1-piece bonus. And then the key item that we're going to be running is the new Viper Mask. If we remember the tooltip from the Hazardous Object, this particular weapon scaled damage based off unstable bomber damage and unstable bomber radius, and this particular mask, which was new to the Lunar Oracle update, gives plus 50% range to your unstable bomber effect, and for every 2% increase in range, you gain 1% more unstable bomber damage. So if you calculate that out, at least from my testing, what I pretty much found is that for every 20% increase that we're getting in range, that is a 10% flat bonus to your unstable bomber damage that you're going to be getting. So right out of the gate, flat, just from the base stat, you're getting 25% bonus unstable bomber damage just from the base stat of the mask itself, and then if you include the 1% bonus as well on top of that for every 2%. That's another 10 plus almost 15% on top of that. So you're 30 plus percent increased unstable bomber damage you're getting just from this one mask alone from the key effect. So really good combination with the weapon that's literally just all about spamming unstable bomber explosions. So that is why we're running that. So moving on to the helmet specifically and going over the mods, we have the Blackstone helmet. And the mod we're going to be running is Deviation Expert. This will have minus 25 to range. Don't worry, this doesn't affect the range of Unstable Bomber. It only affects the range of your gun, and we're pretty much going to be in close range most of the time anyway, so this really doesn't affect the build at all. But it gives you another 10% fire rate, so you're going to shoot insanely quick with this pistol, and 20% flat status damage. I am personally on a Lunar Oracle server, so I happen to get a good roll that had elemental damage and status damage that can be higher than the base stats of a normal talent version of this mod. So that's why I'm equipping it here, because it's actually better on the Crimson Moon events and on a Manibus server that I'm on now for elemental and status compared to just your normal talents version. But if you have the talents version with elemental and status damage only, and potentially great one damage, that's also a good option if you don't have one of the Lunar Oracle chest variations. So you can run that. The other option you technically could look into is work proficiency, but from my testing, what I found was it's actually kind of buggy right now. This one's all about reloading to get the elemental buff, and because of the way the perk works on the hazardous object, you are actually at full ammunition when you do that, even though when you're done with the throw, it says you're down to 0 and then it regens your ammo back. It doesn't count as reloading when your magazine is empty, so you actually don't get the benefit from this unless you're fully shooting the normal bullets instead of throwing. Whereas with Deviation Expert, you get it no matter what. So unlike my Critical Pulse crossbow build, where I would recommend work proficiency on this particular weapon just because of how the reloading gimmick is kind of buggy right now, I would definitely go with Deviation Expert instead. I think this is the best in slot for this particular build. Moving on to the mask, again, we have the Viper mask, and I'm running the Pinpoint Strike Bomb mod, preferably Unstable Bomber variation. When Unstable Bomber hits only one enemy, so this is really good against bosses and things like that, you get 25% bonus final damage to your Unstable Bomber. And then with Unstable Bomber perks, mine rolled with Unstable Bomber damage and blast damage. Ideally, this would have Unstable Bomber range and things like that, but it's the best that I have right now for this particular mod type, so that's what I am running. But this is one that I could potentially improve, and probably the only one that I would recommend for this particular build, at least for the mask. Moving on to the chest piece, we got technically a couple options here. I run Flame Resonance just for some flat more status damage and elemental damage. However, if you have one of the newer mods that are gold that has some decent offensive substats like elemental and status damage built in, or even some lunar mods like this that have elemental and status, then you could potentially run that instead, because you're still getting a little bit of offensive capabilities there. So keep that in mind. But for now, if you don't have any of those updated ones, just a flat Flame Resonance blue mod, which pretty much everyone should have at this point, with preferably some status and elemental substats, would be the best thing to use on the chest for damage. Moving on to the pants, we have the Blackstone pants, and in my opinion, the only thing that you should be using is Precision Charge, and the reason being is because of that same gimmicky bug with the reloading and how the reload works with this. Normally, you would typically want to run something like, where is it? I passed it here. Something like Abnormal Increase, which we used on the Critical Pulse, but Abnormal Increase is based off when the magazine is empty, and again, when you throw your pistol and it reduces all your ammunition, it doesn't count as reloading and getting ammunition back from 0 ammo, because when you throw it initially, you actually do have ammo in your thing. So the way it's calculating is just bugging out, and it doesn't actually recognize it as being an empty magazine, so you're not getting the effect that you normally would from Abnormal Increase. So you have to rely on something that is just a straight up buff when you do any sort of elemental damage, and that is what Precision Charge does. For every 10% weak spot hit, which with AoE attacks with Unstable Bomber, you're going to hit weak spots pretty much all the time. The hit rate of the previous and weak spot hit rate of the previous magazine, your elemental damage will increase by plus 4% up to 24% for 10 seconds. Reloading will reset this calculation. I have mag capacity, which is nice, great one, and elemental damage on this. Ideally, I might have a little bit more status damage or possibly some lunar perks on here. But this is just the best one that I have for some elemental builds right now, so that's why I'm running that. So precision charge for the legs. Moving on, for the gloves, we have the Blackstone gloves, and we are running the Elemental Overload perk. This will give plus 18% elemental damage. In this case, is going to be going towards blast. And I have elemental gold on this as a substat. Ideally, this could be better with some status damage to great ones, or some unstable bomber perks on here. But unfortunately, this is the best one I've got right now. And then last but not least, for the boots, we have the Lone Wolf shoes to get that 1-piece bonus for magazine capacity. And we are running an elemental based covered advance mod. This is still one of my favorites for pretty much all builds. Taking no damage within 4 seconds grants 20% melee weapon and status damage for 30 seconds. This effect resets once the duration ends. And then I have status damage, elemental damage, and damage to great ones on here. So not a bad roll. I could min-max it a little bit. I do have one more upgrade that I could put on it. Who knows what it would give me? Ideally elemental, but we don't know. But as for other potential options, one that I would like to test is Power of Striving, weapon and status damage plus 10%, and depending on how much stamina loss you take, it could boost it up to 20%. So in theory, you could get 30% increased status damage as opposed to 20 with covered advance, but I haven't tested how much stamina loss you need to do in order to get that full additional 20%. You just have to run around a bunch and then potentially get more damage that way, and I also don't know how long that buff lasts, so that is one thing I potentially want to test out. But for the generic running around and just never having to worry about it, the most easy to use, in my opinion, and the one that pretty much everyone's going to have, is going to be the Covered Advanced Talents version. So that is what I would recommend for the boots. Moving on, I guess we could go over the stats. Once I have the pistol out, let me just make sure here. Go to our stats. As it stands, I'm sitting at 82% status damage and 98% elemental explode damage. So not too bad. They're pretty balanced at the moment. We do have some unstable bomber bonus damage here, bonus to elites, things like that, and 50% increased bonus to range, which should stack as we continue to fire this weapon because of our masks, so that will increase our damage as well. So that is all of the armor, stats, and weapons. Before we go into the damage test, let's talk about the food, cradle, and deviations of choice. So if we go to our cradle here, the cradle perks that I would recommend, at least for the Lunar Oracle Manibus server that I'm currently on now, would be anti-coherence and anti-phase for plus 50% damage for pistols and or SMGs. This is, I just have equipped for the crossbow build. Ideally, that actually wouldn't be doing anything. If you had your bingo sniper rifle, you'd want to use this, but I'm actually running the wildfire right now, so I could put something like deviation energy on here for some added defense. Probably might as well go ahead and do that now. Oops, come on. There we go. So on the second row, tactical combo, anytime you switch weapons, 15% bonus weapon damage. Then status enhancement for 15% status damage after hitting a weak spot. Deviant energy defense. After summoning your deviation, you get a bunch of bonus shield and weapon and status damage reduction from deviations, or for deviant attacks. On the third row, take elemental sense for 25% bonus elemental damage, in this case blast, anytime that you do elemental damage, which we will always be doing with this particular weapon. I'm taking marked strike because you get a little bit of bonus weak spot damage against targets marked with a bullseye, which we should be doing with our wildfire hand cannon. If you want some more survivability, you could disable this one and put something like resilience instead to give you a little bit more damage reduction, at least on Lunar Oracle servers, because when your sanity gets low, things get a little bit harder. So that is a potential thing that you could swap. So keep that in mind. On the fourth row, we're going to want to definitely take explosives bonus to give us plus 5% unstable bomber damage for 8 seconds. That can stack up to 8 times. So that's a big unstable bomber boost there. And then in the final row, we want Bounty Hunter. First marking a target grants 2% attack for up to 15 seconds and can stack up to 5 times. So the more you shoot and mark targets, the more more bonus damage you're going to be getting as flat attack, which is really nice. Flat attack goes across the entire build, unlike the other multipliers. It affects everything, and there's not many sources to get flat attack other than just calibrating and upgrading your gun. So that is why Bounty Hunter is really good. So those are the Cradle Perks. Moving on to the Deviation of Choice. There's really only 2 good ones for this particular build, in my opinion, and the best in slot would be the Maiden Deviation, because it has a really nice benefit to blast damage. We go over here and talk to our friend, the well, this is my Wandering Witch Shattered Maiden version, the Halloween one. But what we're looking for here is this bonus right here. Slow down and chain non-boss enemies in front when attacking, also increasing your explosion damage received to those enemies by 70%. And if you have a skill rating of 5, that will increase your explosion damage by 80% potentially, similar to how the Mini Feaster works, which is the other option that I would recommend. So best in slot, just because Unstable Bomber is all about blast and explosion damage, would be the Shattered Maiden. But the other option could be, if you have a good one, the Mini Feaster, similar to what I used on the Critical Pulse build, mainly because we got that 5 skill rating one now. The bonus 80% potential status damage, which is also good for this build because it's based around elemental and status damage. For every tentacle summoned, you get plus 20% increased status damage up to 80%, because we have a skill rating of 5. And it just is good AoE damage if there's a bunch of enemies nearby. Those tentacles spawn all over the place. So those are the 2 best offensive ones, with the Shattered Maiden being the best for offensive, in my opinion. Then if you want a defensive one, especially for the Crimson Moon events, the Festering Gel is always a good option. This can have a skill rating of up to 5, which will heal and recover your sanity over time, and that is the biggest downside during the Crimson Moon events, is we lose a ton of sanity. So you just drop this bad boy on the ground and stand near its aura, and you get healed, and your sanity will be decreased over time as long as you're nearby it, and all of your allies will get healed as well. So if you need a little bit more survivability, this is another really good option. I have the Lunar one, but you can also get the Shiny Blue variation, which has a substat that can give you a little bit of bonus status damage as well. So that's a nice little option that you could potentially get too. And I believe the Red Oracle version can get that potentially as a lucky spare secondary perk. I just haven't found one yet. So those are the 3 deviations. Moving on to food. There's really only 2 or 3 options that I would recommend. Our number 1 go-to drink, best in slot, is going to be the Whimsical Drink. This will give you 25% status damage bonus across the board. Obviously a no-brainer for this build. And then because we can have 1 drink and 1 solid food item, the 2 potential options that I would recommend for food would be the Popcorn. This will give a flat 10% bonus damage to Unstable Bomber damage, and or the Surprise Spring Roll. So this will increase elemental damage by 5 to 15%, and the effect can double if your HP is below 40%. So if you're doing the Crimson events at night and your health is getting reduced because of sanity, this has the potential to give you a little bit more of a boost just because of that doubling effect, and how much of an elemental bonus you're going to be getting. So Surprise Spring Roll or popcorn for Unstable Bomber builds, and Whimsical Drink for your beverage. So that is the food. We went over Cradle Perks, deviations, all the weapons and armor. Only thing left to do is show off the damage. So let's go over to our little test dummy. I ended up putting it up outside because I realized that for whatever reason, having the test dummies in your base when you're doing damage tests actually gets a little buggy. And I was throwing this thing at the dummy and it wasn't calculating any of the exploding damage from the weapon itself, but as soon as I moved it outside, every hit started registering. So I'm almost wondering if the DPS from my previous build video for the Critical Pulse might have been way off as well, because I tested it out here and it just seemed way higher. But anyways, what we basically want to do is fire off this gun as quickly as we can to trigger Unstable Bomber a few times in the beginning. Once we get those stacks, you can just chain throw the reload over and over and over again. And because we have increased mag capacity on our mods and increased mag capacity from the calibration, we're going to be getting a bunch of bonus damage anytime we activate that throwing ability. So that's always nice there. So with some decently calibrated gear and weapons, this is sort of what we're sitting at and how the weapon itself works. You throw it, do some damage, and then once you build up the stacks, you can literally just start throwing it and then the throw damage will actually do more damage than just shooting regularly. And the only time you want to basically shoot again is if you need to build your stacks up again. There we go. Build it up. Do some damage. So we're sitting at about 25,000 damage, and just because of how much damage our AoE explosions from the unstable bomber reload effect is happening, the more we throw this, the slower and steadily this number will increase over time, just because we are doing more damage with the explosions as you can. One little trick, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend because it only works on certain weapons, is you can throw the item a little bit quicker if you use the reloading cancel ability. If you go into your settings and go to game settings actually, and then scroll all the way down, where is it? Sprint to interrupt reload. If you turn that on, then you don't have to necessarily wait for a full reload animation to finish throwing. You can sprint, throw, sprint, and that will instantly cancel it, and you can just quickly throw it again, and it's faster than just sitting here waiting for the full amount. Throw, full amount, throw. So if you kind of shimmy between the two, you can throw it a little bit quicker, but not every weapon is something that you want to do that with. So if you're running multiple builds across the season, you may want to turn it off. And honestly, with how often you're going to be spamming this, it's not going to be that noticeable. But for you min-maxers out there that want the most DPS, that is a little trick that you can do, is animation cancel with your reload. You just have to make sure that that setting is turned on so that your shift sprint will basically counter that reload animation. So that is one little pro tip that you can do there. But now the other thing that we can do, and I'm not going to do any drink buffs or food buffs, but we can do the Shattered Maiden and summon that, and potentially a Bullseye, and get a little idea of what our damage could be with that. So let me switch to that, make sure I'm reloaded there. Don't need to worry about that. We'll wait for the dummy to respec. So I will summon the Shattered Maiden, pop a couple Bullseye hits on it, and then we'll do our little throw combo and see what kind of damage we do then. So go ahead. Oops. Shattered Maiden. 3 stacks of that. Now we start doing some damage. So look at that. 37 spike, 40, 43, 47. This is without the max level 10 calibration on my weapon calibration, without a food or beverage buff. So we're doing a ton of damage. We almost hit 50,000. Probably will build up some stacks here. So that is approximately the type of damage you can do. Unbuffed, basically, from food. With the Shattered Maiden, it gives you a huge bump to your unstable bomber damage, explosion damage, which is really, really handy for this particular build. So that is the Hazardous Object build. Pretty decent damage, and because we get the increased range and things like that, it does really good AoE as well. It does good ad clear for AoE just because of our radius to the unstable bomber being increased, but because of the weapon perk that does increase unstable bomber damage, final damage to single targets, it's also really good for bosses as well. You just do the same thing with the boss that you do to the dummy, unload in 1 or 2 mags, get that initial few stacks built up, and then just spam throw that thing over and over and over again. Put out your deviation as well to give you a nice little explosion damage boost, and you will just burn pretty much anything in the game down in a matter of seconds. So really, really fun build, and it actually turned out to be a lot more enjoyable than I was expecting. If you guys enjoyed it, if you found it informative, be sure to smash that like button and comment down below. I appreciate all of your guys' feedback. Also, if you want to keep up to date on my future content, I got a bunch more build videos lined up and a few other random videos lined up as well. So consider subscribing and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on any of those. And then last but not least, if you want to join a killer community of like-minded gamers, feel free to check the links down in the description and join us on the Discord. We got over 1,000 members in there now that are enjoying Once Human and having fun with it every single season after season. We also do a ton of Once Human giveaways on there, so that's another incentive to join up. We just have a really solid group of people in there that love playing the game. So hopefully jump in and we see you guys around. The other thing that I completely forgot to mention, I probably should have mentioned this in the beginning of the video, is every single one of my build videos that I do, I also have a link down in the description for the build loadout on metabuilds.com. I don't know why I didn't mention that in my critical pulse build that I posted a couple days ago, but check that link out and I'll have all of the information for this build all in one place as a little cheat sheet, so you can check that out as well. I have all of my builds under my name on that list all in one place, which is pretty cool. So yeah, check that out too, and hopefully helps out. But until the next one, hope everyone has a great day, and we'll see you all later.